Childhood trauma can cause problems later in life, but a recent study looked into the issue in depth, the ACE study.
Adverse childhood experiences are the single greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation today.
And if you're a child who's raised in an environment of chaos, of uncertainty, of violence, of neglect, you are being wired
differently. And typically in a way that makes you more vulnerable.
Unless you fix the trauma, you're working on the wrong thing.
The greatest public health emergency that very few know about is not some infectious disease, but what we're talking about is what happens in the home, in the neighborhood, in the community at large. From 1995 to 1997, a landmark public health study was conducted by the Centers for Disease Control, and it's called the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs study for short. Now, what the CDC discovered is quite relevant to what's happening in our city. Researchers surveyed over 17,000 adults about their history of childhood trauma, which spanned 10 different categories of adverse childhood experiences. And they asked questions like, were you ever sexually abused? Was anybody in your household ever incarcerated? Were your parents ever so drunk or too high to take care of you? And what they found is that the more ACEs a person has, the higher risk they would be for poor health or health risk behaviors at a younger age.
Experiences actually shape our growth and development, both of the brain and the body, and they shape the function of our brain and body.
Let me break this down. If you have an ACE score of 4, you have over a 2 times greater chance of having heart disease compared to someone who has an ACE score of 0. For lung disease, it's almost 4 times greater. For a history of alcoholism, over 7 times greater. In fact, ACEs are associated with 6 of the 10 leading causes of death in the United States. Now think about this. Drug companies invest billions of dollars for drugs to treat diseases and their causes that have an increased risk factor, oftentimes of less than 2. But what's being done about ACEs? Finally, and most shocking, they found that a person with 6 or more ACEs has a life expectancy that drops from 80 years to 60. That's a loss of a quarter of your life. To put it simply, ACEs can cause toxic stress, the kind of stress that's so severe that it can disrupt and stunt the growth and development of the brain. This is a CT scan of the brains of 2 3-year-old children. And the one on the left was raised in a normal, healthy environment, and the one on the right was raised under conditions of extreme neglect. Now, the most common effect of toxic stress is on brain function. Toxic stress causes overactivity of the part of the brain that controls fight or flight, while it shuts down and it disrupts the development of the part of the brain that regulates self-control, planning for the future, empathy, reasoning, and controlling impulsive behavior. And this has real-life implications for what's happening in our city. Research out of the crime lab at the University of Chicago has found that when it comes to homicides in our city due to gun violence, there is an unfortunate pattern. It tends to involve young men plus a disagreement, an impulsive action with a gun around leading to a dead body. Again, impulsivity is controlled by an area of the brain that is significantly affected by toxic stress.
If we understand that these problems are connected to traumatic experience that's overwhelming our resources, we're going to follow a whole different set of strategies and pathways to help people stabilize and then also to, improve, feel better, do their best.
Here's the thing. We know that not everybody who's experienced trauma in their childhood is doomed to these consequences. I mean, we all know people in our lives who have made it against the odds. So what is it about the people who are able to be resilient and live a healthy, adjusted life despite having high numbers of ACEs? There is overwhelming research out of Harvard and many other institutions that have found that the single most important factor to promote resilience in the face of ACEs is a loving, stable, consistent relationship with an adult.
Mentorship is actually both a preventive strategy and a treatment strategy. Having this positive relationship with somebody who is settled enough kind of gets us and loves us. Again, these feelings of being safe and connected all help us rewire our brain and get us into a space, again, where healing can happen, where we can learn, where we can work, where we can relate.
The solution is not in medication or technology or in programs, but simply the presence of a loving and caring adult. And this is what GRIP does. That's why I'm so excited to share this with you, because many of the youth involved with GRIP have already experienced tremendous amounts of adversity and trauma in their lives. Not just these ACEs, the 10 ACEs that we talked about, but economic and educational disadvantage, racism, discrimination, violence in the community, fatherlessness, and many others. If you're making an investment in GRIP, you're making an investment in preventing ACEs from impacting future generations.